Senator John Kennedy sat in a Senate hearing room with two pieces of paper, one claiming Congresswoman Ilhan Omar was worth $30 million, the other $95,000, and asked a six-word question that completely shattered her prepared defense. In 2025, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar filed a financial disclosure with the House Clerk's office that said she was worth up to $30 million. 4 months later, she filed an amended disclosure that said she was worth $95,000. The difference was $29.9 million. She called it an accounting error. Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana read both documents on a Sunday evening in his Senate office and decided that $29.9 million was a very large error. He brought both documents to the hearing on Tuesday morning. He set them on the desk, side by side, and he waited for his turn. Senator Kennedy is a 7-3-year-old white man from a southern state who's using a Senate hearing to heavily scrutinize a Muslim woman of color. Ilhan Omar was looking directly at the cameras when she said it. Kennedy was looking at two pieces of paper on the desk in front of him. He picked up the one on the left. Then, he picked up the one on the right. Then, he looked at Omar and put them both back down. What you're about to hear is a 7-3-year-old country lawyer from Louisiana asking a sitting congresswoman the simplest question in American politics. Why did you tell the government you were worth $30 million and then change it to $95,000? Consider the gravity of that moment. The two forms are on the desk. The Senate Judiciary Committee convened the hearing at 10:00 on a Tuesday morning in April. The posted subject was congressional financial disclosure and federal program integrity. The real subject was Ilhan Omar. Everyone in the hearing room knew it. The C-SPAN cameras knew it. The 47 reporters in the hallway knew it. And Ilhan Omar, who requested the opportunity to testify before the committee, to defend herself and her community against what she publicly called a coordinated Republican campaign of racial persecution, knew it better than anyone. The chairman was Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina. To his right sat Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana and Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee. On the Democratic side, Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut, the man who spent 10 years in the Senate trying to end senseless tragedies after 20 children lost their lives at Sandy Hook Elementary School in his home state, sat quietly reviewing his notes. At the witness table, Ilhan Omar adjusted her microphone and opened her manila folder. Beside her sat Representative Rashida Tlaib of Michigan, who come as her guest. Graham gave the hearing to order and recognized Omar for an opening statement. "Before I do," Graham said, "I want to establish the purpose of today's hearing for the record. 4 days ago, on April 18, 2026, Congresswoman Omar filed an amended financial disclosure with the House Clerk's office that revised her reported household assets from between $6 million and $30 million down to between $18,000 and $95,000. This revision was made after the Office of Congressional Conduct requested additional information about the original filing. Separately, House Resolution 713 has been introduced to censure Congresswoman Omar and remove her from her committee assignments in connection with remarks she made following the fatal incident involving Charlie Kirk in September of 2025. Congresswoman Omar requested the opportunity to appear before this committee to address both matters. The committee has granted that request. Congresswoman, you're recognized for your opening statement. Omar stood. "Thank you, Chairman Graham. I requested this opportunity to appear before the committee because the American people deserve to hear the truth, not the version of the truth that Fox News manufactures every night, and not the version of the truth that Republican politicians invent to justify their obsession with a Muslim woman from Minnesota. Let me be direct. The Republican Party has spent the last 7 years targeting me, not my policies, not my votes. Me, personally, because I'm a black Muslim woman who had the audacity to win an election and refused to be quiet. She turned toward Kennedy. Senator Kennedy, you represent Louisiana, a state that ranks 50th in education, 49th in health care, 48th in child poverty. You've been in the United States Senate since 2017, and by every measurable statistic, the people of Louisiana are worse off today than the day you took office. Your state's children go to bed hungry. Your state's schools are failing. Your state's hospitals are closing. And yet, instead of working on the problems in your state, you're sitting in this hearing room, preparing to read documents about my finances because attacking a Muslim woman is easier than fixing Louisiana. That's the truth, Senator, and everyone in this room knows it. The amended financial disclosure that Republicans have seized upon was a voluntary correction of an accounting error involving my husband's business valuations. The Office of Congressional Conduct received our explanation. The business's liabilities weren't included in the original filing. When the discrepancy was identified, we corrected it immediately. That's what responsible disclosure looks like. And the broader campaign, the allegations about Minnesota, about financial misconduct, about my community, is nothing more than the criminalization of an entire refugee population by a Republican Party that has always feared immigrants and has always used us as political targets. The Somali American community in Minneapolis came to this country with nothing. They came fleeing civil war. They came fleeing famine. They came fleeing Al-Shabaab. They built businesses. They raised families. They opened restaurants and shops and community centers. They sent their children to American schools. They did everything this country asked of them. And now, because a group of criminals exploited a federal program during a pandemic, the Republican Party wants to treat an entire community of survivors as suspects. Let me say something to the people watching at home who aren't from Minnesota and who don't know my district. The 500,000 Somali Americans who live in Minneapolis aren't fraudsters. They your neighbors. They nurses in your hospitals. They drivers for your ride-share apps. They students in your universities. They small business owners who pay their taxes and obey the law and kiss their children goodnight and wake up every morning in a country that still, after everything they've survived, doesn't fully accept them. And what this committee is doing today, what Senator Kennedy is about to do with his 2 pieces of paper, is telling those 500,000 people that their Congresswoman is a criminal without evidence, without charges, without a trial. Because in the Republican Party, accusation is conviction, and the accused doesn't get to speak. Well, I'm speaking. Senator Kennedy, I'm speaking because my community elected me to speak, and I won't be silenced by a man from a state that ranks 50th in everything and pretends he has something to teach me about accountability. Talib applauded. Murphy didn't. Graham looked at Kennedy. Senator Kennedy, you're recognized. Kennedy didn't stand. He adjusted his glasses, the slow, deliberate adjustment he'd been making in Senate hearings for 9 years, the gesture that every C-SPAN regular recognized as the signal that something was about to happen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congresswoman, I appreciate you coming today. I know you didn't have to. I respect that. His voice was the Louisiana drawl that had made him famous on cable news. Slow, warm, the voice of a man who appeared to be thinking out loud, rather than delivering prepared remarks. It was the most carefully constructed performance in the United States Senate, and it worked every time. Now, you said a lot just now, and I'm going to address some of it. But first, if you don't mind, I'd like to talk about these 2 pieces of paper. He picked up the document on his left. This is your 2025 financial disclosure, filed with the House Clerk's office, under federal law, with your name on it. Your signature. It says your household assets are between $6 million and $30 million. That's what you told the United States government you were worth as recently as last year. He set it down, picked up the document on his right. This is your amended disclosure, filed 4 days ago, April 18th, 2026. Same office, same law, same signature. It says your household assets are between $18,000 and $95,000. He held both documents up, one in each hand. Congresswoman, $30 million. He raised his left hand slightly. $95,000. He raised his right. These are both your documents. You signed both of them under federal law. My question is simple. Which one is lying? It was an accounting error, Senator. The Business S liabilities were not. Congresswoman, I heard your opening statement. You said, accounting error. I want to talk about that phrase for a moment, because in my experience as a lawyer, and I've been a lawyer for a very long time, longer than I should probably admit, an accounting error is when you add 2 and 2 and get 5. An accounting error is a misplaced decimal point. An accounting error is forgetting to carry a 1. $29.9 million is teat. An accounting error. Congresswoman, $29.9 million is the operating budget of a small city. Senator, I wasn't personally involved in valuing my husband's businesses. Congresswoman, your name is on the form, not your husband's name. Yours. You signed it. Under federal law, you're personally responsible for the accuracy of your financial disclosure. That's not my rule. That's the Ethics in Government Act of 1978. And Congresswoman, the amended filing you submitted 4 days ago shows something else that I find very interesting. It shows that you carry between $15,000 and $50,000 in student loan debt and between $15,000 and $50,000 in credit card debt. He paused. Let the numbers sit. How does a person who told the government she was worth $30 million also carry credit card debt? Congresswoman, did you think about that when you signed the original form? Because where I come from in Louisiana, the state you just said ranks 50th in everything. People who are worth $30 million don't carry credit card balances. People who carry credit card balances aren't worth $30 million. Every person watching at home knows that, because most of them carry credit card balances too, and none of them have ever claimed to be worth $30 million. Omar's hand came down on the table. Senator Kennedy, this is a witch hunt designed to... Congresswoman, I didn't write these documents. You did. If your own financial disclosures are a witch hunt, you need to take that up with your own accountant, not with me. He set both documents down on the desk, side by side, facing Omar. Now, let me walk through the specifics, because I think the American people watching at home deserve specifics. Your original disclosure listed your husband, Tim Minet's venture capital management firm at approximately $7.9 million. The winery in Santa Rosa, California, EST Crew LLC, at approximately $1.5 million. Those were the valuations that made you a multimillionaire. Your amended disclosure, filed 4 days ago, says those same businesses have no net value. Once liabilities are factored in, zero. Congresswoman, $7.9 million became zero. $1.5 million became zero in 4 days. Your spokesperson, Jeremy Slevin, told the Wall Street Journal, and I am quoting, "The amended disclosure confirms what we've said all along. The Congresswoman is not a millionaire." End quote. Congresswoman, what we've said all along. Those are your spokesperson's words. If you've been saying all along that you aren't a millionaire, then why did you file a document with the United States government that said you were worth up to $30 million? If you knew you weren't a millionaire all along, then you knew the form was wrong when you signed it. Which is it, Congresswoman? Did you not know the form was wrong, in which case you signed a federal document without reading it? Or did you know the form was wrong, in which case you signed a federal document that you knew was inaccurate? I'm a country lawyer, Congresswoman. In my experience, those are the only two options. Neither one is an accounting error. Omar looked at Talib, looked at the table. The Office of Congressional Conduct has accepted our explanation. And Congresswoman, the Office of Congressional Conduct sent you a letter requesting additional information. That isn't the same as accepting your explanation. That's the opposite of accepting your explanation. That's the office telling you they have questions. And if the OC has questions about a $29.9 million discrepancy, I think the American people are entitled to have questions too. And Congresswoman, since we were talking about your husband's businesses, I want to note something else for the record. The winery in Santa Rosa, California, EST Crew LLC, is currently the subject of a financial misconduct lawsuit filed in Washington, D.C. by an investor named Naeem Mudd. Mr. Mudd alleges that your husband and his business partner misrepresented the company's financial health and failed to pay promised returns. That lawsuit is active. It is a matter of public record. So, let me summarize what the public record shows as of today. Your husband owns a winery that is being sued for financial misconduct. Your husband owns a venture capital firm that went from $7.9 million in value to zero in 4 days. Your financial disclosure went from $30 million to $95,000. You carry student loan debt and credit card debt. And the Office of Congressional Conduct has sent you a letter asking for more information. My Mima used to say, when you find one raccoon in the trash, that is a raccoon. When you find 5 raccoons in the trash, that is a family reunion. I count 5 raccoons, Congresswoman. A country lawyer from Louisiana just held up 2 pieces of paper. Same name, same office. $30 million versus 95,000, and asked which one is lying. Then he counted 5 raccoons. Think about the implications of these 2 forms. If you feel this isn't just a simple accounting error because Kennedy's about to move to Charlie Kirk, and what Ilhan Omar said on 3 consecutive days after a man was fatally targeted. Congresswoman, I want to move to a different subject, because this hearing is about more than financial disclosures, and there's a matter that I believe the American people deserve to hear discussed in a Senate hearing room. Kennedy's voice changed. Not dramatically. The folksy warmth receded by 1 degree. The way a courtroom lawyer's voice changes when the questioning moves from preliminary matters to the center of the case. On September 10, 2025, a 31-year-old man named Charlie Kirk was fatally attacked on the campus of Utah Valley University in Orem, Utah. He was giving a speech. He was exercising his First Amendment right to free expression, the right that every person in this room, on both sides of the aisle, has sworn an oath to protect. He lost his life for speaking. Charlie Kirk was a husband. His wife's name is Erica. Charlie Kirk was a father. He had 2 young children. He kissed those children goodbye that morning and drove to a university campus to talk to college students about politics. He didn't come home. I want to be clear about something, Congresswoman, because I think it matters. I didn't agree with Charlie Kirk on everything. I'm 73 years old. He was 31. We came from different generations, and we had different styles. But I agreed with him on one thing, that I think every American, Democrat, Republican, Independent, doesn't matter, agrees on. I agreed with him that Americans have the right to speak in public without being fatally targeted for it. Now, the timeline. On September 10th, the day of the tragic incident, you issued a statement condemning the violent act. Your statement said, quote, "Political violence is completely unacceptable and indefensible," end quote. That was the right thing to say, Congresswoman, and I want to give you credit for saying it. You said it quickly. You said it clearly. You said it before many other members of Congress had said anything at all. On September 11th, one day later, 24 hours later, while Charlie Kirk's wife was notifying extended family members and while funeral arrangements were being discussed, you gave an interview on a Zateo town hall with Mehdi Hassan. In that interview, you called conservatives who connected the fatal incident to left-wing rhetoric, quote, "full of nonsense," end quote. That's your phrase, Congresswoman, not mine. And in the same interview, according to House Resolution 713, which was introduced in the House to censure you and remove you from committees, you smeared Charlie Kirk's character and implied that his own rhetoric had contributed to the environment that led to his fatal end. I want to say that again, Congresswoman, because I want every person watching at home to understand what happened. A man lost his life on Monday. On Tuesday, a sitting member of the United States Congress went on television and suggested that the deceased man had helped create the conditions for his own tragic demise. On September 12th, 2 days after the incident, while Erica Kirk was choosing a casket for her husband, you reposted a video on social media that disparaged the character of Charlie Kirk. Not his policies, not his organization, his character. While his family was in mourning, September 10th, condemnation. September 11th, smearing the victim. September 12th, mocking the dead. 3 days. 3 different messages. The condemnation lasted 24 hours. Congresswoman, the smearing lasted longer. I'm not going to tell the American people what to think about that sequence. They were grown men and women. They were capable of reading a calendar and drawing their own conclusions. Marsha Blackburn leaned into her microphone. Mr. Chairman, I want to add something briefly. I want to speak not as a Republican, but as a mother. Charlie Kirk left behind 2 young children who'll grow up without their father. Those children will never hear his voice again, except in recordings. They'll never be picked up by him from school. They'll never sit on his lap on Christmas morning. They'll know their father only through photographs and videos and the stories that their mother tells them. And one day, after their father lost his life, one day, Mr. Chairman, a sitting member of the United States Congress went on television and attacked their father's character. Those children will someday be old enough to find that interview. They'll watch it, and they'll know that a congresswoman from Minnesota used the 24 hours after their father's passing to smear him on national television. I don't care what party you belong to, a man was fatally attacked. He had a wife and 2 children, and one day later, his character was attacked by someone who holds public office. That's beneath this institution. It's beneath any institution. And it's beneath any human being who has ever loved a child. Omar stood up. I condemned the violent act. I said, political violence is unacceptable. I was one of the first members of Congress to issue a statement. You're taking my words out of context to create a false narrative. Congresswoman, I read your condemnation. I gave you credit for it twice. I also read your interview the next day, and I read your social media post the day after that. I didn't take your words out of context. I put them in chronological order. September 10th, September 11th, September 12th. That isn't context manipulation, Congresswoman. That's a calendar. And calendars aren't partisan. A 7. Three-year-old senator from Louisiana just laid out what Ilhan Omar said on 3 consecutive days after a man was fatally struck for giving a speech, and a Tennessee senator just said it was beneath this institution. Pay close attention to that 3-day timeline because the Sandy Hook senator is about to speak, and what he says next will change the hearing. Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut had been silent for the entire hearing. This was unusual. Murphy wasn't a quiet senator. He'd spent 10 years as the most vocal advocate for public safety reform in the United States Congress. He'd wept on the Senate floor after 20 children and 6 educators lost their lives at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut, on December 14, 2012. He'd filibustered for 15 hours in 2016 to force a vote on safety legislation. He'd made political violence, the prevention of it, the mourning of it, the refusal to accept it, the defining cause of his career. He'd been silent because he had been deciding. Now he leaned forward. "Mr. Chairman, I want to make a brief statement." Graham nodded. "I've spent 10 years in this body trying to end political violence in America. I don't make distinctions between victims based on their politics. I didn't make those distinctions after Sandy Hook. I didn't make them after the Pulse nightclub tragedy. I didn't make them after the congressional baseball incident when my Republican colleague Steve Scalise was injured on a baseball field. And I won't make them now." He paused, looked at Omar. Charlie Kirk was a conservative. I disagreed with nearly everything he said. I debated his organization publicly. I criticized his rhetoric. I believed, and I continue to believe, that some of his positions were wrong and harmful. But he was fatally attacked, Congresswoman. He lost his life for giving a speech, and one day later, you went on television and attacked his character, while his children were learning that their father was never coming home. I can't defend that. Not from a Republican, not from a Democrat, not from anyone who holds the privilege of serving in the United States Congress. I've spent 10 years asking this country to take political violence seriously, and that means taking it seriously when the victim is someone I disagreed with, because the weapon that struck Charlie Kirk didn't ask what party he belonged to, and the grief of his children doesn't care whether their father was a conservative or a liberal. That's all I have to say. Mr. Chairman, the hearing room was silent. Chris Murphy, the Sandy Hook senator, the Democrat who built his entire career on the premise that political violence is unacceptable regardless of who the victim is, had just applied that principle to a conservative victim. He applied it against a member of his own party, and he'd done it in the quietest, most devastating way possible, not by raising his voice, but by lowering it. Talib stared at Murphy. She didn't speak. Every muscle in her body wanted to stand up and call Murphy a sellout, a traitor, a coward. But Rashida was many things: impulsive, passionate, theatrical, and she was also smart enough to know that attacking the Sandy Hook senator for opposing political violence would be the worst political decision she had ever made. So she sat and said nothing. And the silence of Rashida Tlaib, a woman who never been silent about anything in her political career, was its own kind of verdict. Omar looked at Murphy with the expression of a woman who walked into the hearing room with a prepared defense against Republican attacks, and hadn't prepared for a Democrat, a progressive Democrat, a public safety Democrat, a Sandy Hook Democrat, to stand up and apply his own principles against her. She'd expected Kennedy, she'd expected Graham, she'd expected Blackburn. She hadn't expected Chris Murphy, Senator Murphy. Her voice was tight. I condemned the violent act on the day it happened, before anyone else in Congress made a statement. I was one of the first to condemn it. Murphy looked at her. His voice didn't change. You were, Congresswoman. On September 10th, I acknowledged that. I gave you credit for it. But September 11th happened after September 10th, and September 12th happened after September 11th. The condemnation on day 1 doesn't erase the smearing on day 2, and the mocking on day 3. That isn't how accountability works. Not for Republicans, not for Democrats, not for anyone. Omar had no response. She sat down. The Sandy Hook senator just told Ilhan Omar that he can to defend what she said about a deceased man. The man who spent 10 years fighting senseless tragedies, applied his own principle to a conservative victim, and broke with his own party in the process. Remember the profound silence in that room. If you feel that courage looks the same regardless of party, because Kennedy isn't done, and the 2 forms are still on the desk. Ilhan Omar stood up during the next round of questioning. She'd absorbed Kennedy's 2 forms. She'd absorbed Blackburn's rebuke about Charlie Kirk's children. She'd absorbed Murphy's betrayal, the Sandy Hook senator turning her own party's principles against her. Now she fought back. And for 30 seconds, she fought back with everything she had. Senator Kennedy, since you want to discuss records, let me discuss yours. You've been in the United States Senate since 2017. In those 9 years, Louisiana has ranked dead last, 50th out of 50 states in education, every single year, 49th in healthcare access, 48th in poverty. Your state has one of the highest child mortality rates in the developed world. Your state has one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the developed world. Your state has one of the highest incarceration rates on the planet. Not just in America, Senator, on the planet. You've voted against the Affordable Care Act expansion that would have provided health care to over 200,000 uninsured Louisianans. People in your state, Senator, your constituents, people who trusted you to represent them. You voted against the child tax credit expansion that temporarily lifted 3.7 million American children out of poverty, including tens of thousands of children in Louisiana. You voted against the bipartisan infrastructure bill that would have rebuilt crumbling bridges and roads in a state that floods every hurricane season because its infrastructure hasn't been updated since the 1970s. You're a man who has done nothing for the children of Louisiana in 9 years, Senator Kennedy. Nothing. 9 years. 50th in education. Every single one of them. And you sit in this hearing room in your pressed suit, with your folksy drawl, and your 2 pieces of paper. And you lecture me about children. And Senator, you called yourself a country lawyer. You've been calling yourself a country lawyer for 9 years on C-SPAN. Let me tell you what you really are. You're an Oxford-educated, Vanderbilt-educated, University of Virginia, law-educated career politician who clerked for a federal judge and served as secretary of a $1.6 billion state retirement fund. You've spent 30 years building a television persona, the folksy Southern gentleman who cleans his glasses and quotes his grandmother. And everyone in Washington knows it's an act. Your staff knows it. Your colleagues know it. The reporters in the hallway know it. The only people who don't know it are the people in Louisiana who keep voting for you. Because they think you're one of them. You're not one of them, Senator. You're a millionaire lawyer who pretends to be a country boy because the accent polls well. And one more thing, Senator. You want to talk about Charlie Kirk? Let me talk about political violence, too. In January of 2026, a man named Adam Lee Osborne of Wichita, Kansas, was arrested for making severe physical threats against me. He posted on Facebook, and I am quoting, "If undocumented individuals can come here unimpeded, I can harm them unimpeded." How do I end up a minority in my own country? He threatened my well-being, Senator. A sitting member of Congress. And I didn't see you, or Senator Blackburn, or anyone on the Republican side of this table issue a statement condemning it. Not one word. So before you lecture me about political violence, Senator Kennedy, perhaps you should ask yourself why you only care about it when the victim is a conservative. Tlaib stood and applauded. Two Democratic staffers in the back stood briefly. For 30 seconds, the hearing room's momentum shifted. Omar had landed real punches. The Louisiana rankings were devastating because they were true. The Oxford, Vanderbilt, UVA credentials were devastating because they were true. The menacing message was devastating because it was documented and because Kennedy had edited, as far as the public record showed, issued a public statement about it. For 30 seconds, the room belonged to Ilhan Omar. It was the strongest moment she'd have for the rest of the hearing. Kennedy waited for her to finish. He didn't interrupt. When she was done, he adjusted his glasses. Congresswoman, those education rankings are approximately accurate. Louisiana has real problems. I've never pretended otherwise, and I've never claimed to have solved them. You're right about the ACA vote. You're right about the child tax credit. Those are policy disagreements I'm happy to discuss in a policy hearing. And Congresswoman, the menacing message you received from Mr. Osborne was abhorrent, and the man belongs in prison. Political violence is wrong, regardless of who it targets. You, Charlie Kirk, Steve Scalise, anyone. If I didn't issue a public statement about the threat against you, I should have. And I am saying so now on the record. But I want to point out something you just did. And I think the folks at home caught it. Even if you didn't, you just spent 90 seconds talking about Louisiana's education system. You spent another 30 seconds talking about my degrees from Oxford and Vanderbilt. You spent 15 seconds calling my accent a performance. That is 2 minutes and 15 seconds of your time. In those 2 minutes and 15 seconds, you didn't spend 1 second, not one, explaining the $29.9 million discrepancy between your two financial disclosures. You didn't explain why your spokesperson said you'd been saying all along that you weren't a millionaire, while your filed disclosure said you were worth $30 million. You didn't respond to the Charlie Kirk timeline, September 10th, 11th, 12th, and you didn't address Senator Murphy's statement. Congresswoman, changing the subject to Louisiana's poverty rate isn't an answer to my question about your two forms. Calling my accent a performance isn't an answer. Telling me I went to Oxford isn't an answer. Those are deflections. And deflections work on cable news, Congresswoman. I'll give you that. You're very good on cable news. But deflections don't work in a Senate hearing room where two pieces of paper with your name on them are sitting on a desk 12 feet away, and the cameras are rolling. So, I'll ask one more time, and I'll ask it slowly, because I want every person watching at home in Louisiana, and in Minnesota, and in every state in between, to hear the question. Your original disclosure, $30 million. Your amended disclosure, $95,000. Same name, same year, same office, same law. Which form is lying? Omar didn't answer. I'll note the non-answer for the record. Kennedy just let Omar land every punch. Louisiana rankings, Oxford credentials, the accent, the menacing message, all of it. He even admitted she was right about the threat. Then he asked 6 words. Which form is lying? And every punch she threw vanished. Consider which form tells the truth. If you believe $29.9 million isn't an accounting error, because Kennedy is about to connect 5 facts, and the 5th one will end the hearing. Kennedy just let Omar land every punch, Louisiana rankings, Oxford credentials, the accent, the menacing message, all of it. He even admitted she was right about the threat. Then he asked 6 words, which form is lying, and every punch she threw vanished. Consider which form tells the truth. If you believe $29.9 million isn't an accounting error, because Kennedy is about to connect 5 facts, and the 5th one will end the hearing. Congresswoman, I want to connect some facts before I close, because I think they reconnected, and I think the American people have a right to see the connection. Fact 1. Your financial disclosure originally said you were worth up to $30 million. You've now amended it to $95,000. You call it an accounting error. Fact 2. Your home state of Minnesota is currently the subject of what federal prosecutors have called the largest concentration of public irregularities in American history. Not $250 million. That was just feeding our future. The total daycare irregularities, healthcare discrepancies, housing stabilization issues. The United States Attorney for Minnesota, Joseph Thompson, has estimated the total at approximately $9 billion. $9 billion. Congresswoman, with a B. He has called Minnesota, and I am quoting from his public statement, a national poster child for public corruption. Fact 3. Your own colleague, House Majority Whip Tom Emmer, a Republican, but also a Minnesotan, Congresswoman, a man who represents the same state you do, called you 2 days ago on Fox News, quote, a complete fraud. His exact words were, while Minnesotans have been getting fleeced to the tune of $9 billion by Somali instigators, Ilhan Omar and her husband have been raking in millions through their shady businesses. End quote. Fact 4. Chairman James Comer of the House Oversight Committee has publicly stated that you're a person of interest in the federal investigation of financial misconduct in Minnesota, Comer said on Fox and Friends Weekend, and I'm quoting, we're not supposed to investigate it on the Oversight Committee, but because she is a person of interest in the Somali situation, I've been trying to get that. End quote. The Department of Justice is actively investigating. Fact 5. On April 18th, 4 days ago, you revised your financial disclosure downward by $29.9 million and called it an accounting error. He picked up both documents again, held them up, left hand, right hand. Now, Congresswoman, I'm a country lawyer from Madisonville, Louisiana. You said that as a performance, and maybe you're rewrite, but even a performing country lawyer can count to 5. And when 5 facts line up in a row, 30 million becomes 95,000, 9 billion in irregularities in your state, your own Republican colleague calls you a complete fraud, the chairman of the Oversight Committee calls you a person of interest, and you file an amended disclosure 4 days later. Even a country lawyer starts to see a pattern. My Mima used to say, John, when the dog knocks over the trash can once, that's an accident. When the dog knocks over the trash can every Tuesday, that's a habit. I'm not accusing you of anything, Congresswoman. Accusations are for prosecutors. I'm a senator. My job is to ask questions. And my question, the last one I'll ask today, is this. He held up the left document. 30 million. He held up the right document. 95,000. Why did a congresswoman, who is a person of interest in a $9 billion investigation, file a financial disclosure claiming she was worth $30 million? And then, after the investigation became public, after Chairman Comer sent a letter to her husband, after the Office of Congressional Conduct requested additional information, revise that number to 95,000? Is that an accounting error, Congresswoman? Or is that a correction that became necessary when people started looking? He set both documents down on the desk, side by side, facing the cameras. Because where I come from, and I know you don't think much of where I come from, Congresswoman, and that is fine. But where I come from, when somebody changes their story after people start asking questions, we don't call that an error. We call it something else. And the folks watching at home, the folks in Louisiana and Minnesota, and every other state in this country who file their taxes on time and report their income accurately because they know the IRS will come after them if they don't. Those folks know exactly what we call it too. But Omar stared at Kennedy. She opened her mouth to respond. No words came. She opened her mouth a second time. The sharp cadence that had carried her through 7 years of congressional confrontations, the voice that had turned all about the Benjamins into a viral phrase, the voice that had called Republicans racists and Islamophobes and white nationalists from committee hearing rooms and cable news studios and rally stages across America. That voice, in this moment, produced no sound. It wasn't theatrical silence. It wasn't a dramatic pause. It was the silence of a person who's been asked a question for which every possible answer is worse than saying nothing. If the original form was accurate, she'd lied on the amended form. If the amended form was accurate, she'd lied on the original form. And if both were honest mistakes, $29.9 million of honest mistakes, then the American people were entitled to wonder what other numbers in her career were honest mistakes too. The silence lasted 5 seconds, then 7, then 10. Kennedy spoke his last line. Quiet, folksy, the Louisiana drawl at its softest. My Mima called that a tell. Congresswoman. He looked at the chairman. I yield back, Mr. Chairman. Graham gave the hearing closed. The committee will refer the financial disclosure discrepancy discussed today to the Office of Congressional Conduct and the Department of Justice for further review. The committee notes the public statements of Chairman Comer and House Majority Whip Emmer regarding ongoing investigations. The committee also notes Senator Murphy's statement regarding the censure resolution. This hearing stands adjourned. The gavel fell. The hearing room began the slow, careful process of emptying that happens when cameras are still rolling and everyone in the room knows they're being watched. Rashida left first. She gathered her papers without looking at Omar. The quick, deliberate movements of a woman who spent the last 90 minutes wanting to speak and not speaking, and was now done with both. She walked out through the main doors and was on her phone before she reached the hallway. The reporters waiting outside asked for a comment. She said 4 words. This was a disgrace. She didn't specify which part of the hearing she considered a disgrace. The reporters noted the ambiguity. It would be discussed on cable news for the next 48 hours. Chris Murphy left second. He gathered his notes slowly, placed them in a leather folder, and walked past Omar's seat on his way out. He slowed, not quite stopping, not quite passing. The half-step of a man who wanted to say something and decided not to. He straightened his tie. He kept walking. He didn't look at Omar. The silence of his passing was louder than anything he'd said during the hearing, because what he'd said during the hearing had been devastating, and the absence of a follow-up was its own kind of statement. Marcia Blackburn left third. She walked out through the main doors, stopped at the press gaggle, and said one sentence to the reporters. Charlie Kirk's children deserved better. She didn't take questions. She walked to the elevator. Ilhan Omar sat at the witness table for a full minute after the gavel fell. The C-SPAN cameras were still on. They always were for the minutes after the gavel, capturing the aftermath that was sometimes more revealing than the hearing itself. The cameras captured her sitting alone, her manila folder closed in front of her, her hands flat on the table, her eyes fixed on the 2 documents that were still on Kennedy's desk across the hearing room. 2 pieces of paper, side by side, one saying 30 million and the other saying 95,000, both bearing her name, both filed with the clerk's office, both signed under federal law. After 60 seconds, she stood. She closed her folder. She walked out through the main doors of the hearing room, past the reporters, past the cameras, past the microphones. She didn't stop. She didn't comment. For the first time in her congressional career, Ilhan Omar walked past a bank of reporters without saying a single word. The reporters noted this. It would be the lead story on 3 networks by 6:00. Kennedy folded both documents and placed them in his breast pocket. The left one first, then the right one. He stood up slowly, the way 7-3-year-old men stand up after sitting in Senate hearing chairs for 90 minutes. Lindsey Graham caught his eye from the chairman's seat. John, Mr. Chairman, $29.9 million. That is a lot of accounting error. Lindsey, it is. Blackburn's words from the press gaggle would be quoted for 48 hours. Murphy's statement would be quoted for a week. But Kennedy's question, which form is lying, would be quoted for months, because it was the kind of question that didn't require an answer to be devastating. The question was the answer. The silence was the confirmation. And the 2 forms sitting side by side on a Senate desk were the evidence that no accounting error in history could explain. John Kennedy drove to his uncle Beauregard's place in Zachary, Louisiana, on Friday evening. Beauregard was 81 years old and had been running the same bait shop on the bayou for 43 years. He was sitting on the porch with a ceramic mug of coffee that said "Gone Fishing" on the side. Kennedy sat down next to him. "Didn't mention the hearing. Saw you on the C-SPAN, John, and 2 pieces of paper. That's all it took. Your Mima would have done it with 1. Kennedy smiled. First time he'd smiled since Tuesday. They sat in silence for a while. The bayou, the cicadas, the smell of bait and coffee, and Louisiana in the spring. The sun going down behind the cypress trees, the way it had been going down behind the cypress trees for as long as either of them could remember. John, yes, sir. $29.9 million. I know. That isn't an accounting error. I know. What is it? Kennedy reached into his breast pocket, took out the 2 folded documents, looked at them, put them back. I don't know what it is. Beauregard, that's above my pay grade. Beauregard took a sip of coffee. Your Mima used to say, when the math don't add up, the story won't either. She was right. She was always right. The sun finished going down. The cicadas got louder, and a senator from Madison Parish sat on his uncle's porch with 2 pieces of paper in his breast pocket and listened to the bayou, because some questions answer themselves. If you wait long enough, and the 2 forms had done the asking, and the $29.9 million silence had done the answering, and the country lawyer had done his job. If you made it this far, you just watched a 7-3-year-old country lawyer from Louisiana hold up 2 pieces of paper, both signed by the same Congresswoman, both filed under federal law, one saying $30 million and the other saying $95,000, and asked the simplest question in American politics: which one is lying? You watched him lay out what Ilhan Omar said on 3 consecutive days after a man was fatally taken away for giving a speech. You watched the Sandy Hook senator, the Democrat who has spent 10 years fighting for public safety, tell his own colleague that he couldn't defend what she said. And you watched Ilhan Omar open her mouth to answer a question and produce no sound. Reflect deeply on these events. If you believe that $29.9 million isn't an accounting error, keep paying close attention as these details unfold. Think about the 2 forms. If you feel every politician should have to explain why they told the government 2 different numbers under penalty of federal law, and share this with everyone who has ever filed a tax return and wondered what would happen to them if their math was off by $29.9 million, because the IRS doesn't accept an accounting error as an explanation, and neither should the American people. My Mima used to say, when the math don't add up, the story won't either. The math didn't add up. the country lawyer noticed, and two pieces of paper, one in each hand, one saying 30 million and the other saying 95,000, did the rest. The forms are still in his breast pocket. The questions are still unanswered. And the country lawyer is sitting on his uncle's porch in Zachary, Louisiana, drinking coffee and listening to the cicadas, because some questions answer themselves if you wait long enough. And $29.9 million is a very long wait.